Prestige branded compact coupes are usually simply sleeker versions of existing saloon models. The Lexus RC isn't like that, a coupe with an extra dimension of class that offers something rather different to the usual German Prestige branded choices in this segment.
A sports coupe can be different things to different people. For some, it must be a rewarding driving machine first and foremost. Others, though, want to balance dynamic virtues with qualities like cosseting luxury and impressive efficiency. And it's to these people that this Lexus RC coupe is designed to appeal. In price and performance terms, this car is designed to suit those looking at coupes based on premium badged compact executive saloons, specifically Audi's A5 and coupe versions of the BMW 4 Series and the Mercedes C-Class. Now, the RC shares some of its parts with a compact four-door Model 2, the Lexus IS, but it also borrows a little more of its DNA from the larger, more executive segment Lexus GS range. Hence, perhaps what the Japanese maker hopes is a more upmarket feel. It's the kind of thing that you'd want if you had to downsize from, say, a BMW 6 Series or even a Bentley Continental GT, but you didn't want to make too many compromises in luxury. Now, if that sounds tempting, then Lexus hopes you might also like this car's rather exclusive looks, derived from a concept car the brand first displayed at the 2013 Tokyo Motor Show. A year later, the RC was launched in production form, but only as a pricey, high-performance V8 RCF variant. It took until early 2016 for two more affordable versions of this car to be made available, a petrol-electric hybrid and the conventional turbo 2-litre RC200T version that we're going to be trying here. Both offer a more laid-back, luxurious approach to sports coupe motoring that Lexus hopes will please people tiring of the usual German alternatives in the segment. Will it? Well, that's what we're here to find out. So, what to expect? Well, on one hand, you know this to be a luxury Lexus that's larger and heavier than its German coupe rivals, with an emphasis on poise rather than performance. On the other, you can't get away from the fact that it looks purposeful and dynamic, especially with this solar flare orange paint job, almost like some kind of swollen, slightly more sophisticated Toyota GT86. It's a contradictory confection. Prior to this test, we spent some time with the wild V8-powered RCF range-topping model, which packs a 477 brake horsepower punch to the backing of a soundtrack inspired by Lexus' ballistic LFA supercar. Here, though, our focus is on the mainstream RC models. Both share the RCF's front engine, rear-driven configuration, but use four-cylinder petrol engines to produce just under 250 brake horsepower, but achieving that goal in two very different ways. So we'll start with the conventional approach, typified by the version that we're testing here, the RC200T. This gets the same twin-scroll 2-litre turbo unit used in Lexus IS, NX and RX models, here producing 241 brake horsepower and capable of spiriting this car to 62 miles an hour in 7.5 seconds en route to 143 miles an hour. These figures are slightly blunted by this RC model's weight, which is why its performance in this guise is equivalent to lesser 184 brake horsepower BMW 420i and Mercedes C200 rivals, rather than the comparably powerful 430i and C300 models that it's actually priced against. Still, it feels quite sporty, aided by a low-slung driving position and the rapid shifts of the 8-speed Sports Direct Shift auto transmission that was originally developed for the RCF. There are no manual gearbox RC models. The change times, the agreeably firm ride, and the surprisingly direct and feelsome steering can all, along with the throttle response, be altered by various modes of the standard drive mode select system, activated by this silver rotary dial down in the gear stick. This defaults to its normal setup on startup. There's a snow option to limit wheel spin in bad weather, and for those occasions when you're feeling virtuous, an eco setting is provided that restricts the engine output and the throttle response. It's only when you switch to the more serious sport driving mode, though, that the RC really seems to wake up and take an interest in the road ahead. This setting, as well as sharpening everything up, also activates what Lexus calls a GAI shift control setting on the gearbox. Now, dynamically, it uses information from the car's G sensors to select the ideal gear ratio for any situation of spirited driving. Better still, the transmission will automatically downshift during hard braking for a corner, hold a lower gear through the bend for greater control, and then select a suitable low gear on the exit of the turn to give you greater throttle response. The same G sensor even senses when the car goes light over a crest and ramps up the braking pressure to help you control things on the other side. And we think this works really well. Go for the F Sport variant that we have here, and 3 other features further enhance that experience. First, the drive mode select system features an even more focused Sport Plus setting. Secondly, there's a Torsen limited slip differential to help you get power down through the bends. And thirdly, Lexus fits an adaptive variable suspension setup that works via the same drive mode system modes and continually tweaks the ride to suit the road you're on and the way that you want to drive. It's all enough to create in this car far more of a sporting drive than we ever thought it would deliver. Now, I mentioned earlier that there were 2 engine options on offer to mainstream RC buyers. Well, it's the second of these that will account for the vast majority of sales in this country. The model in question using the 2.5 litre petrol-electric hybrid power plant that's familiar across the brand's model lineup. It develops a combined 220 brake horsepower output that's enough to take an RC from rest to 62 miles an hour in 8.6 seconds, but top speed is rather limited at 118 miles an hour. This variant has to have a belt-driven CVT auto gearbox with 6 virtual ratios, and this, along with the variant's extra weight, it's 60 kilograms heavier than the 200T, ought to blunt its sporting pretensions. Does it though? Well, not as much as you'd think. We spent some time in an RC 300H before moving on to this more conventional petrol version too, and found that some things about the hybrid derivative were actually more engaging. Its CVT box responds more quickly than the Sport's direct shift transmission to your steering wheel paddle shift commands, and with electric assistance lower down the rev range, the hybrid version seems more urgent in the way it accelerates from lower speeds. Like all Lexus and Toyota hybrids, the car can be driven in 3 ways: by the electric motors only, as it is from start off for up to 1.2 miles, with just the engine if you're giving it full throttle, or more usually with a combination of both. During deceleration and under braking, the engine switches off and both electric motors act as high output generators, recovering kinetic energy that automatically recharges the batteries for the next time the hybrid system is able to switch back into electric only mode. In other words, you have all the ingredients for what might arguably be the most sensible sporting car that you could buy. One of the key reasons you might want this car lies with the way it looks. This mainstream version inevitably does without the arresting machismo of its high-performance RCF stablemate, but it'll still turn heads, especially if you specify this particular model's distinctive orange solar flare paintwork. The shape appears sophisticated, and it is. Other models in this class are merely coupe versions of existing compact executive saloons. The RC, though, is far more its own design. Its fundamentals are a confection of the best of current Lexus engineering. And that means rear architecture from the brand's compact IS saloon, a front structure from the company's full executive class GS model, and a floor plan from Lexus's old ISC convertible. Up front, things are dominated by a massive double spindle front grille, one of the few in current production, actually improved by the addition of a large registration plate. This one needed to break up the sheer expanse of the chrome frame structure. It's finished in this case with F-pattern mesh and is flanked by signature LED headlamps that on most models use this dual-like triple L design and sit above these tick-shaped daytime running lights. In profile, the styling is equally arresting, seemingly shrink-wrapped, with three-dimensional curves that seem to change in appearance and effect as you move around the car. It's from this perspective that you realise this model to be slightly larger than its obvious rivals. While price and performance might lead you to pitch this Lexus against, say, a Mercedes C-Class coupe, this RC's 4,705mm length is actually much closer to the Stuttgart brand's more upmarket E-Class coupe. That more mature stance is further emphasised by the huge 19-inch wheels featured on most models, these multi-spoke F-Sport rims looking particularly nice. The rear design gets an aggressive twin exhaust profile, benefits from these prominent muscular wheel arches, and is particularly characterised by these aero-stabilising fins there to channel air around each corner of the bumpers. Look closely and you'll see further fins on the outside of the three-dimensional LED rear combination lamps. That's part of a whole package of features designed to funnel airflow back and cleanly away from the car. Well, time to take a seat inside, where the driver-focused theme continues in a leather-lined cabin deliciously different to the German class norm in its statement of style. Though much of it is derived from the brand's humbler IS saloon, there's still an agreeably expensive feel with lovely touches like the metal surround to this analogue clock. It's not ostentatious and some of the materials are quite varied, but it looks good, unique, cultured and clever, especially in this F-Sport guise. This more dynamic model is set apart by the aluminium finish used for the pedals, the interior trim panels and the scuff plates, plus a branded steering wheel and beautifully supportive bespoke F-Sport seats with stitched quilting. Instrumentation for F-Sport buyers is based on that of the brand's LFA supercar, with colours and graphics that change according to the driving mode you select via this silver dial by the auto gear stick. Press this steering wheel button and the display slides neatly to the right to reveal a customisable trip computer incorporating fuel readouts, audio settings and a compass. Anything the instrument binnacle can't tell you will be covered off by this 7-inch Lexus media display screen, set high in the centre of the dash and dealing with the usual audio, Bluetooth and reversing camera functions. Here it's been upgraded by the desirable addition of the brand's premium navigation system, which allows you into the Google local search database and opens up access to features like Google Street View and the web-based Panoramio photo sharing service. This premium setup also has the advantage of dispensing with the standard model's fiddly computer mouse style infotainment controller, and that's in favour of this electrostatic pad over which you move your fingers, pressing or double tapping to select the desired function. It's not as intuitive as rival German brand systems, but you do get used to it really quite quickly. Look around and there's little to detract from what this RC model's chief engineer, Junichi Furuyama, describes as a Japanese omotenashi welcome. Unique high-end touches we particularly like include the electrostatic switches that adjust the air conditioning, the way the interior lights activate with a swipe of your finger, and these strips of white ambient lighting on the doors that automatically adjust in brightness to suit the driving conditions. It's all very nice indeed. And in comparison, rival BMW or Mercedes or Audi will feel a class or two less polished unless you spend a fortune speccing it up. As for practical RC touches, well, there aren't too many. The glove box and the door pockets are both very small and there's no overhead cupboard for your sunglasses. What you do get is this storage compartment between the seats that incorporates a couple of USB points and a 12-volt socket. Alongside it, there are these two deeply recessed cup holders. Time to try the rear, accessed via doors so long that it'll be hard to fully open them in a cramped car park. That does at least help with access to the rear, as does a one-touch walk-in function, which activates when you pull this lever on the seat shoulder that slowly slides both the base and the backrest forward. Well, as for actual space back here, you shouldn't get your hopes up. Even by the standards of this compact coupe class, legroom is tight. Rivals like coupe versions of BMW's 4 Series and the Mercedes C-Class may be shorter in overall length, but they have slightly longer wheelbases, enabling them to offer slightly more room for adults. On top of that, the sloping roofline means that anyone over 6 feet tall will have their heads right up against the roof. Still, none of this will be of much interest to typical RC buyers who, if they use these seats at all, will only press them into service for children or perhaps designer shopping bags. Out back, boot space is a touch restricted too. The 374 litre total you get in this RC 200T version is about 20% down on the capacity you could expect in a rival BMW 4 Series or Audi A5 model. And that is a best case scenario. Opt as most will for the RC 300H variant, and the need to accommodate the hybrid Synergy drive system will eat into that total, reducing it to 340 litres. Look a little more closely at what's on offer though, and the picture does brighten. For a start, most versions of this RC200T get as standard the proper temporary spare wheel that costs extra on those rival German models and would decrease their luggage space. Plus, all RC buyers get a 60/40 split folding rear backrest that will allow you to accommodate larger items. The mainstream RC coupe range that we're looking at here sits in the £35,000 to £40,000 bracket, well below the £60,000 that Lexus will ask of you to get this car in V8 powered RCF guise. The standard lineup is exclusively built around two 4-cylinder petrol engines. Unlike its German rivals, this Japanese brand isn't offering a diesel in this car. Lexus thinks it has a better alternative to that kind of power plant in the form of its 2.5 litre petrol-electric hybrid unit, available for a premium of around £1,000 over the other option that we've been trying here, which is a 2-litre petrol turbo. Now, whichever your choice of engine, it comes mated to automatic transmission, a CVT belt-driven box with the hybrid, or a sports direct shift 8-speeder with the RC200T. Now, target rivals come exclusively from coupe versions of compact executive saloons made by the prestige German brands, specifically 3 cars, Audi's A5 and coupe versions of the BMW 4 Series and the Mercedes C-Class. Now, if you're pitching that trio against an RC, then remember you'll have to add on extra for the automatic transmission that Lexus includes as standard. As for the specifics on such comparisons, well, let's start with the 220 brake horsepower RC 300H hybrid version of this Lexus, since that's the one that most customers will want. Now, there aren't any hybrid rivals that you can consider as an alternative, only diesel options. And the same kind of £35,000 budget that a petrol-electric RC requires would also buy you automatic versions of the Mercedes C220D Coupe, the BMW 420D Coupe, or Audi's A5 in 2-litre TDI 190 PS guise. Here we're trying the other mainstream Lexus RC model, the 241 brake horsepower conventional petrol turbo RC200T. Now, since this can't be had in the entry-level luxury trim available with an RX 300H, prices start a little higher than with the hybrid, at just under £37,000 for the F-Sport variant. Lexus has clearly priced this RC200T against the Mercedes C300 Coupe, which delivers the same power output and in automatic form costs virtually the same. Pretty much the same sort of money would also buy a comparably powered BMW 430i Coupe automatic, or for a similar outlay you could get slightly less power but slightly more grip with Audi's A5 in 2-litre TFSI Quattro S-Tronic 225 PS guise. Lexus, though, reckons that this RC is a slightly classier and more mature option in this segment than cars like the ones I've just mentioned. It's more than just a 2-door version of an existing saloon, instead being a real product in its own right. So arguably a better match for this car than the rivals I've been talking about is Mercedes' more upmarket E-Class Coupe, a car directly comparable in size but costing around £5,000 more. Even if you do compare this RC to C-Class, A5 and 4 Series models though, it can still seem pretty good value once you take into account its higher level of specification. And that's something that we're now going to have a look at in a little more detail. As I mentioned earlier, to meet the expected higher demand for the RC 300H hybrid model, Lexus is making it available with an extra, more affordable entry level of specification, luxury trim. Even here though, you get quite a lot. Outside, an RC 300h luxury variant comes fitted with 18-inch 5-spoke alloy wheels and, like all RC models, gets LED headlamps with an automatic high beam, along with LED technology that also features with the daytime running lights and the rear light clusters. Plus there are auto headlamps and wipers, front and rear parking sensors, headlamp washers and an alarm. Inside, all RC models come with dual zone climate control and a 4-mode version of the drive mode select system that allows you to tweak the throttle response, the steering feel and gear shift timings to suit the way that you want to drive. There's also a smart entry and start system, cruise control, a leather stitched multifunction steering wheel, leather seats and an auto dimming rear view mirror. Infotainment is taken care of by a 7-inch Lexus media display that gives you Bluetooth phone compatibility and also a 6-speaker DAB audio system. Most potential RC buyers, though, will be considering the more dynamic-looking F-Sport level of trim, not least because it allows you to choose not only the hybrid model, but also this RC200T petrol turbo version too. F-Sport variants alone get the desirable adaptive variable suspension system that allows the drive mode select setup to also alter the ride. There's also an extra drive mode setting to play with at this level, Sport Plus. In addition, buyers get larger 19-inch alloy wheels, distinctive triple L configuration LED headlamps and a smarter mesh front grille, plus power folding mirrors, LED turn indicators, and if you go for the RC200T, a temporary spare wheel too. Inside, F-Sport models feature an aluminium finish for the pedals, the interior trim panels and the scuff plates, plus a branded steering wheel, bespoke F-Sport seats with stitched quilting and instrumentation based on that of the brand's LFA supercar. At the top of the range, Premier trim, as you might expect, really does include almost everything you could want. Outside, the 19-inch wheels have a smart 10-spoke finish. Inside, there's beautiful Shimamoko wood trim paneling and 8-way power-adjustable heated front seats. That central infotainment screen comes alive too at Premier level. You get Lexus premium navigation with a DVD player and a remote touch tracer control electrostatic touchpad. Plus, there's a thumping 17-speaker Mark Levinson DAB surround sound system. Onto options. Now, if you can't stretch to Premier trim, then the powered seats, the navigation setup and the Mark Levinson stereo are all available as options lower down the range. Avoid entry-level trim and you also get the chance to specify a sunroof too. Now, with all models you can add a rear spoiler and illuminated scuff plates, plus you might want to pay the extra to turn your RC into a Wi-Fi hotspot. You can improve boot space flexibility with horizontal and vertical cargo nets and protect that area with a trunk liner and a rear bumper protection plate. Other practical extra cost touches include mud flaps, door edge protectors and a special film that can be applied to protect the door handles and the rear bumper from scratches. Onto safety. Now, you don't get the kind of autonomous braking system that you'll find fitted to Mercedes and BMW rivals, but otherwise most of the other key items seem to be in place. As you'd expect, you get the usual electronic assistance for braking, traction and stability control, all coordinated as usual in a Lexus by the brand's clever BDIM, Vehicle Dynamics Integrated Management System. There's also tyre pressure monitoring, an energy absorbing bonnet and bumper, anti-whiplash head restraints, an emergency brake signal for panic stops, hill start assist control and ISOFIX child seat mountings. Avoid entry-level trim and you get a lane departure alert system too to stop dozy drivers from veering out of their lanes on the highway. Plus, if the worst does come to the worst, every RC comes with no fewer than 8 airbags. So as well as the usual twin front, side and curtain bags, that includes knee bags for the driver and the front seat passenger. If you want to go further, you'll need this particular car's top Premier trim level. This includes a blind spot monitor to stop you from dangerously pulling out to overtake and a rear cross traffic alert system that warns you of approaching traffic when you're reversing out of a parking space. Plus, at Premier level, buyers get the extra cost option of 2 further radar-driven safety features. The first of these is a pre-crash safety system that scans the road ahead for potential accident hazards. Now, if one's detected, then you'll be warned, the pre-crash seatbelt pre-tensioners will be armed, and pre-crash brake assist to supplement the braking effort will be activated. If you don't respond or you aren't able to, then the system will automatically apply braking to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. The same radar also drives an adaptive cruise control setup, which automatically keeps you a safe distance behind the car in front, and that's at low speeds as well as high ones. Cost of ownership is one of the bigger debating points when it comes to this car. Now, the magazines will tell you that the returns of the RC 300h hybrid variant, the version of this car that most customers will buy, can't quite match those of comparable prestige branded German diesel models. And that is true. An RC 300h manages 57.6 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 113 grams per kilometre of CO2. Pretty good, you might think, for a 220 brake horsepower, 2.5 litre petrol powered sports coupe. But coupe versions of direct rivals like the BMW 420d and the Mercedes C220d are about 5% cleaner and up to 20% more frugal. To some extent, this is to be expected. This RC is, after all, the weight of a car full of passengers heavier than those two rivals. In hybrid form, it's up to 160 kilograms heavier than a C220d and up to 225 kilograms heavier than a 420d. This is partly because Lexus has built in extra body strengthening to help this model excel in US rollover crash tests, and partly because this is a slightly larger car, sized more closely to, say, an E-Class coupe rather than a C-Class coupe. And an E220d coupe, we should point out, has emissions a lot dirtier than this RC 300h, and it is also slightly more thirsty. That is one valid point in this car's favour. Another one is that it runs more silently on cheaper green pump fuel. And yet another is that it emits nitrogen oxide emissions that are way down on what you'd be smoking out at the wheel of a diesel. Of course, during much of your urban motoring in an RC 300h, say when you're inching along in traffic with the engine seamlessly disabled, the EV mode activated and battery power in motion, you won't be emitting any emissions at all. So the proposition's starting to look a little more credible now, isn't it? Now, if you agree, the clincher might come when you start to consider the benefit-in-kind taxation advantages of running an RC 300h rather than one of its diesel rivals. We've crunched the numbers and found that over 3 years, a 40% taxpayer would save £363 over the cost of running a BMW 420d and a massive £2,248 over the cost of running a Mercedes C220d coupe. If you're a 50% taxpayer, those savings rise to £454 and £2,811. And those are figures that it's very hard to ignore. On top of that, an RC 300h owner would also be saving in maintenance costs, thanks to the low servicing requirements built into the Lexus hybrid drive system. As part of this, there's no starter motor or alternator to go wrong, no drive belts to break, maintenance-free timing chain, no particulate filter to get clogged up with diesel fumes, and of course, thanks to the CVT Auto gearbox, no clutch either. The hybrid drive system has a good record for minimising tyre wear, and its battery will last the life of the car. Plus, the regenerative braking setup helps to extend the life of the brake pads. Over 60,000 miles of driving, the front pads should only need replacing once, while the rear pads and all the discs will probably last the full distance. Of course, it is a rather different story if you opt for the conventional petrol turbo RC200T variant that we're trying here. The Lexus engineers have done everything they know to try and make this twin-scroll VVTi engine efficient, but its returns still remain a little adrift of obvious rivals. Expect 39.2 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 168 grams per kilometre of CO2. For the record, the 5-litre RCF V8 variant manages 26.2 miles per gallon and 251 grams per kilometre of CO2. Whatever derivative of this car you prefer, you'll need to activate the Drive Mode Select system's Eco mode to get anywhere near its quoted efficiency figures. This moderates the throttle response and the engine power output while also tweaking the climate control. There are also other tools on offer to enable the driver to aid this car's frugality. In the car section of the Lexus media display, trip info and past record options graphically show your success in saving fuel. And in the instrument display, the trip computer can show you exactly how much of that fuel the standard stop and start system has saved on your current journey. Although we're not really sure why you want to know that. There's more too. In the RC300H, a hybrid system indicator replaces the usual rev counter on the dash, and for efficiency you'll need to make sure that its needle stays as often as possible in either of the blue eco or charge zones. In this RC200T, meanwhile, there's an eco driving indicator that's supposed to help with more frugal acceleration, flashing at you if you flex your right foot too greatly. To be frank though, we found that a bit annoying. I mean, this is after all a sports coupe. What else? Residual values. Well, they're not quite as good as you get from the German brands in this class. You're talking 36 to 38% of original value after a typical 3-year ownership period. Interestingly though, the RCF V8 model fares much better, predicted to be up at around 43%. As for insurance, you're looking at groupings between 34 and 36 for the RC300H, Group 40 for this RC200T, and Group 48A or 50A for the top RCF. Where Lexus could do better is the warranty it provides. Although there's an 8-year package to cover the hybrid engine, every other part of the RC package must be covered by an unremarkable 3-year, 60,000 mile deal. That doesn't seem overly generous in this day and age, particularly since parent company Toyota offers 5-year cover on all its models. You can of course pay extra to extend this cover, but in our view, you really shouldn't have to. But does that matter? This is, after all, a Lexus, a car in which market experience suggests virtually nothing is ever likely to go wrong. The facts are that hybrid technology generates fewer warranty claims than conventional petrol or diesel engines do. And if something ever should happen, so charming and helpful are the award-winning dealers in the network that you may end up being almost glad that it did. That's just as well, given that you're going to be visiting them relatively often for routine maintenance. Servicing intervals are every year or 15,000 miles for both engines. That's a little more frequent than we'd like, although a prepaid servicing plan can help to keep the costs down. Sometimes first impressions count, and we'd wager that this car, parked alongside a comparable BMW, Mercedes or Audi coupe, would be seen by most as the classier, more upmarket proposition. Now that'll matter to potential coupe customers, as will the fact that this car is not only good looking, but also beautifully built, agreeably rapid, lavishly equipped, and everyday usable. Of course, the fact that it's a little larger and a little heavier than its rivals has an effect in the form of ultimate handling prowess. An RC isn't as agile to chuck around as coupe versions of the BMW 4 Series, the Audi A5 and the Mercedes C-Class would be. Nor is it quite as frugal in terms of upfront fuel and CO2 emission stats. Does that matter though? Well, we think probably not. The business buyers being targeted here don't want to drive like Fernando Alonso, and the hybrid version of this car that almost all of them will choose easily makes up for any slight efficiency shortfall, with benefit-in-kind taxation savings that are hard to ignore. And in summary, well, ultimately this is not only a more interesting, individualistic choice in this segment, but arguably a rather clever one. A certain kind of buyer will like this RC very much. We can understand why.